Hi,
Hi,
thanks for being here.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really pleasure being having you in the podcast here and with all of your like work and everything. So thanks for making the time up.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. First of all, congratulations on your new book.
Yeah.
Uh, for someone who hasn't read it or like planning to, like, what's the best description or summary for the book?
So the book tries to address the theme of walls in a
Yeah,
way. It's the
it's
tale
called
of a
like Whispering Walls, right?
whispering
Yeah.
walls. It just came out in April and it's available on Amazon.
Yes.
It captures the story of a Kurdish family 5 weeks before the Iraq invasion in 2003.
Okay.
So two of the siblings live in London and one of them lives in Suleimania here.
Okay. Yeah.
It tries to capture the idea of walls. Basically, I've always been sort of mesmerized and
Yes, by
curious
that
about
huh?
this idea of
Yeah.
us people, nations, individuals, repeating the same mistakes over and over
Yes,
again
the cycle, huh?
and not learning.
Yes.
And to me, it seemed like there is a wall between us and the past which prevents us from learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the best explanation for that wall would be a wall that's built by trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Because of past traumas, we
Yes.
psychologically protect ourselves, but sometimes even nations do that and they end up repeating the same history. So I try to explore that traumatic wall, which prevents us from growing and learning and moving on.
Yeah.
But also I try to capture the harms or problems caused by patriarchy, not just for women, but also for men who
Yes.
abide by it.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do for men when they abide by patriarchal norms?
By that system, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, like the name, I think it also goes with. We have a saying in the south. I don't know, like if you have it here in the region as well, which is like, even though you can't trust the walls because like back then, like even the walls can like
Hear.
have ears and like can like spy on you or tell on you. So like, was that considered when like you named the book, or like it's
So just as the walls listen, I think the walls also talk. So
Mhm.
my emphasis is
Yeah,
more
on the
on
talking.
you build this wall to protect, but
Yeah.
whispers come from it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hints from the past try to infiltrate into your life.
Yeah, because like it's a fixed structure, because
Yes.
like they are witnessing like generations and generations of families. So like, of course they can whisper.
They can also whisper
Yeah.
things, tragedies of the past.
Yeah,
and-
so
and they
it's
can
like
betray.
fictional characters based on like somewhat real events, or like it's
Yes, I mean, so I utilize real world
Yeah.
events like the invasion of Iraq, the anti-war protests,
Yes.
the Kurdish-Iraqi conflict. There's a relationship in the novel between the Kurdish woman,
Mhm.
one of the main characters, and an Arab man.
Mhm.
And I try to explore the idea of a new Iraq and the relationship between Kurds and Arabs
Yes.
through that love relationship and whether
Mhm.
it will work or not.
Yes. And any final words for someone who's interested for the book? Like, what should they put in mind before going into it?
So I think if you're interested in, memory,
Mhm.
family stories,
Yes.
trauma, national and family trauma,
Mhm.
the intertwining of the two,
Yes.
Ethnic conflicts,
Yes.
history.
Do we have that?
No, surely
yeah.
not, surely
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
And things like that. So I think it's about the effects of history on individuals
Mhm.
and the lived experiences of people, but also about what wars do, what violence does to communities and how it divides them.
yeah. And okay, so funnily enough, like I haven't taken one of your classes. I was planning to for like fall 2021 for English, I think 1 or 2 it was.
Right.
But then like the instructor changed. So like
Shame,
yeah,
yes.
it's a shame. And like I've heard like stories about like your classes. So as someone who hasn't taken any of your classes, like would you suggest for a student to like go through that process
Oh, of
and like
course.
what yeah, I've heard like the process of like the excessive readings that you have
Mhm.
and the overall theme of your classes. So like what can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think I try throughout my classes, social justice matters to me.
Yes.
In particular, women's rights matter to me. And that's something I've dedicated more than 20 years of my life to. So the literature I teach, the theories I teach, are trying to problematize inherited views and ideas.
Yes.
You know, from generation to generation, we all end up with these common sense ideas that we've inherited from our ancestors, from our cultural values, from our religious values, from our community. And we usually take them for granted and we never question them because there's consensus. We live in a community that believes in the same thing. Nobody challenges that. And our education system in Iraq and the Middle East mostly, I think, doesn't teach us how to question.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't actually encourage us to question and doubt.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I think we get stuck in some values that are no longer suitable for our changed world. You know, culture is not static. It's changing all the time.
Yes.
So you need to update your values so that it fits the modern world rather than sticking to values that are no longer relevant and they are oppressive. So I try to, through my teaching, I love literature.
Yeah.
You know, my other hat is I am a writer.
Yeah.
And I love theory. I studied philosophy. And I am a feminist. So I try to sort of use literature, use theory, and use critical thinking in order to, in particular, interrogate the patriarchal system. Because in, for example, the course you wanted to take, English 102, is critical reading and writing.
Yes, so you go through the handmaid's tale, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea is to learn to question, to consider arguments, to see if it works, to see if the premises work together, if the conclusion is correct, if you have enough evidence, and so on. So it's interrogating argument and learning how to make arguments, and it teaches you not to be easily brainwashed. Yeah. So in order to question the premises and the conclusion. So I try to do that through the questioning the patriarchal argument. What is the patriarchal argument which justifies women's oppression and men's superiority?
Yes.
Are the premises correct? Do we have enough evidence? Are there counterexamples? Does it all add up to the patriarchal conclusion that men are usually, because they are more rational and aggressive and logical, better than women?
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do, but I also try to, for example, last semester I taught creative writing. I am very passionate about writing, as you can imagine. Yes. And I think many people can write. Maybe they're too scared to. Maybe they've never tried it or had the opportunity. But like any other thing, if you apply yourself, if you practice, if you read, and we have the opposite too. We have some young people, your generation, that write and publish, but they don't read other people's work. I think as a writer, you have an obligation to read. To
expose yourself to all the different schools of thoughts and everything.
Exactly. And to know what has been produced in your language.
Yes.
Are you going beyond that? Because you may be thinking that you're producing something very new and this is innovative, but it's actually been done before. So if you don't know your historical literary history,
you can't build on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't go beyond it. You can't build on it.
Yes, of course. And you discussed the idea of obsolete values and the ideas of how we should change traditions, but also taking the other side and engaging the critical thinking here. Back then, I think it was a bit more dangerous to question everything and to be opposing that much, because the risk to reward ratio back then was so much different than now.
Right.
Yeah, I think now it's it's not easier, but in some sense, it's possible for someone if to collaborate on wrongdoings, whether through social media or I think the world now is a bit more encouraging of that, while back, and especially in the region here. I mean, I know it's not a perfect utopia here, but it's definitely better than 30, 40 years old back then, because the killings were, I think, much more detrimental and much more the whole situation back then was stricter than now.
Yeah,
would you agree with that?
We had a dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking was censored.
Exactly.
Books were censored, right? Films were censored.
Yeah.
Any dangerous idea like freedom and liberation was questionable and censored. And one would pay with one's life if you went against certain things. Right? Nowadays, it's probably not so extreme.
Yes.
I agree. But I think we also are in a stage of fragmentation of the truth.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there are so many different agendas pushing different kinds of ideas and selling them as the truth. And we know from history that if you repeat a lie long enough and enough
It will
times,
become truth.
yeah, it becomes truth for some people at least. So no matter how untrue it is, if somebody makes up something about you and thousands of people start repeating it, some people will believe it about you because they don't know you, they don't have any access to other sources of information. So it's yes, it's possible to think critically and to question, but it's also sometimes difficult to know the truth because there are so many different agendas pushed, in particular in our community here through social media. There's so much manipulation, there are conspiracy theories. It's more difficult. So it takes a lot more to know what is right. And I asked this question today in my class because it's towards, as you know, it's the end of the semester.
Yes, finally.
You know, and I've had very smart male students who usually get the arguments about justice, about equality, about rights and democracy, but they're so resistant to women's rights. And, you know, I just asked, and before I started the Zoom call, I was like, I'm not recording this out of interest as a teacher. I just want to know what happens. I would like to hear from the male students here. Why is there resistance? Why, you know, because if you tell them about, for example, you know, racism is not black people's problem. It's actually white people's problem, right? The Kurdish problem is not actually the Kurdish problem. It's, for example, the nationalist state of Turkey's problem or the previous nationalist state of Iraq's problem. Similarly, women's problem is not women's problem. It's men's problem, or at least patriarchy. It's a system of that creates the inequality. So why aren't you drawing these parallels? You understand these other causes. Why don't you understand them? So it was very interesting. They came up with some explanations and some very good ones too. Like one of them said, so we usually, a man who believes in conventional ideas or traditional views usually would be socializing with similar people. The woman he would know, wife, sister, cousins, mother, they would be part of the system and they wouldn't be challenging it. So he thinks they're happy. The friends he hangs around with never challenge it. And
it's
they
an
think
echo
it's right.
chamber,
It's exactly, And another person said, well, because of gender segregation in schools, for example, boys and girls, boys have never learned to listen to girls or learn about their experiences.
Like most, and like myself included, like most people grow up in like separated schools. So like you would go to only men or female women's schools. So like up until university, like I think only for first and second grade, like I went through classes that were mixed. So like that also affects the way that you view the
relate.
world.
Yeah, because I think girls and boys here and men and women, when they grow up, they do not relate to each other as human beings. So if there is a relationship of, for example, kinship, they are either my sister or my cousin or my mother or my wife and no one else, like colleagues, but they're not really social relations. Whereas, you know, in an ideal world, men and women would be human beings that relate to each other, talk to each other, share their pain and, you know, their experiences with each other. But here, like in Iraqi and Kurdish social circles, whenever there's a social gathering, the men would sit together in one corner, the woman would sit in another corner with the children. The men would be talking about football and politics. The woman would be talking about, you know, other things, or, you know, and there isn't this kind of crossover because we, as human beings, we have many shared interests and values. Why is it that we cannot talk to each other? This culture doesn't allow us to explore that space of friendship, of camaraderie, of working together. And that's why it's problematic for men to understand women's experiences.
Yeah, I think also like going back to the question that you raised about like, why do you like value these, let's call them like traditional right-wing values more than being more accepting of women's rights? For me, I think it's like the way that the system is designed, like it's more appealing to young men than rather
privileges.
Like and like I'm as myself, like I believe in like some right-wing values as well, but because I think for like young men, they are providing more things and more privileges than.
Yeah.
And like you raised this issue, I think in 2018 in like a podcast that you did in New Zealand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you talked about like how feminism shouldn't be women against men. It should be like, it should be us against
Patriarchy.
I guess injustice and everything. And that's like the things that should be more of the whole image of this movement. And I think it would be more appealing for the young men. It's like, it's not women are trying to replace us. It's
Yes,
like
yes.
us working together. And
And
actually, yeah, I think it's not the voice that's being mostly broadcasted.
amplified.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also because, I mean, if you see, even patriarchy is not just men. Of course, it gives more privileges to men, but so many women are part of the patriarchal system, and they
Yes.
uphold the same values, and they don't believe in women's rights. They don't believe in women. I mean, many women don't vote for other women. They don't think they're qualified. They would always vote for men during elections. Many women would favor men. Many women would like to have boys instead of girls, right? And many women feel privileged if a man talks to them, and would much more value the word of a man over the word of a woman. So patriarchy is not men and feminism is not women. It's actually, patriarchy is a system where men and women uphold this value system that privileges men. And feminism is a value system which could be including men and women, upholding equality between men and women.
Yeah.
And so we are trying very hard. We have a project currently in the Center for Gender and Development Studies called Masculinity, Violence and Prevention. And one of the things we're trying to do is to bring men as advocates of equality. As you know, not just as the perpetrator of crimes, not as victims of violence, but also as agents of change. They can also contribute to bringing about social justice.
Yes. Any final remarks on the subject before, like, I want to talk about higher education now?
Not just that. I mean, I have been teaching at AUIS for 9 years now.
Yes.
I've had many students, sometimes a student who does not get the argument, who continuously looks at his watch and wants the class to be over, has got back in touch with me a few years later saying, I found that class very interesting. Or the opposite has also happened, where sometimes they get the argument and they go back to, because whether you like it or not, in AUIS, we live in a bubble.
Yes, I also wanted to like...
because there are many ideas that we can discuss here and we can address here.
But like they are not applicable on the outside world.
And then sometimes when students graduate, they go back to that dominant discourse.
Yeah.
And from everywhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's much easier to go back. I mean, I've seen that even with men who, you know, Kurdish, Middle Eastern men who have lived in Europe for years and they've had to take responsibility for household chores, for child rearing, for all of that. And then when they come back here,
they go back to the default setting.
Because it seems all the men are sitting down and having their tea while the women are serving them. It's good, right? So it's easy to go back to the traditional value because it gives you more time and more advantages. So I just hope those who do come to AUIS come because we uphold certain values, and one of them is gender equality. Because we believe in justice and we believe in rights for men and women equally. And come to these classes with an open mind. Yeah,
I would suggest the same.
Yeah, but many people, unfortunately, don't want to engage in that argument. I've had students telling people, you know, later I was told that so-and-so doesn't want to come to your class because they're worried that you will influence them. And I'm like, I don't understand that logic, because if your belief is strong enough, whether it's religious belief, it's faith, or your cultural beliefs about value system or whatever, then it should survive questioning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, you question it, you still hold it true because it survives that test. But if your values are so shaky that you cannot, you're too scared to question them, then I worry that you've inherited beliefs that you don't even know what they mean.
Yes.
So come with an open mind to university, wherever you go. It's the time where you are challenged, where old values are reconsidered, and allow yourself to grow and develop.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like that's one of the things about like the AUIS bubble you discussed upon. Like there are also like bubbles inside this AUIS bubble, and like where people are often like so strict and like so closed upon their friends groups and like their beliefs and their like hangouts. Like they are not uh, opening for like there isn't a lot of conversation
No,
happening
in between.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I think that's going to uh, like it's going to affect also going back to the after graduation. It's like these little bubbles are also going to be bigger and bigger once
Yes.
you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is why I think we should have more lines of communication. Like everyone should be willing enough and like putting the effort to hear the other side.
Yeah.
Because like it would be better if we like even if you don't agree with the other side, like at least you would be understand.
Consider it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would understand like where they're coming from. And
Yeah, we see that, as you said. I mean, we, as professors here, we try to mix students,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Girls and boys, Arabs and Kurds, Yazidis and Muslims. We
yes,
try to pair them up together in group work.
to see what happens. Yeah,
And to get them to talk to each other. Usually what happens is that during that class activity, there is a mingle. And then after class is over,
yeah,
everybody goes
yeah,
back to their
everyone
group.
goes to their group. And
The Arabs together, the Kurds together, the Yazidis together,
Yeah.
the Muslims together. And that's a shame because really diversity is a strength.
And it's like it's one of the things about Iraq. It's such a diverse country. It's
Yeah.
such a we have so many nationalities and people living here. But like I don't think there is a lot of open line of communication
There
between
isn't,
everything. Yeah.
unfortunately. And I think that's partly why, you have people who are completely ignorant of each other's histories.
Yes.
Arabs of Kurds, Kurds of Arabs, Shi'i of Sunni, Sunni of Turkmens. Many of these things, if we stick to our own group and that reinforces our own ideas, we never really know the full truth. Yeah, and we never really know how what we believe in could be oppressive to other people. But in these conversations, yes, there's a period of doubt. Yes, there's a period of, I believed this was black and this was white, and now there is a gray area, and that's scary.
Yeah.
But actually, a lot of creativity and invention happens when you come out of that conversation of opening yourself up to the other,
Yeah.
of learning about the other's experiences, and maybe creating something new with the other. Or if not, at least
You went through that process.
Yes,
Yeah.
an informed choice rather than an ignorant choice.
Yeah, and like also like to be more understanding of the situation, like I kind of like get why this is happening, because like for students who are like not from this region and like who are living here, whether in the dorms or like outside, like you are away from home, and like you are attached to it, but you don't realize that until like you leave. So like it makes sense to surround yourself with people who
remind you
of home. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I found myself like right now, like when I started like when I joined here like 2019, my first couple of weeks it was about, okay, I just want to get to know people who are outside my city and everything. But like right now, most of my friends are people in the same city where I grew up in.
Yes.
Because like it's
comfort.
It's easier. Like it's people who went out and hung out in the same places that you went to. Like you probably share a lot of stories together. So like I get that why that's happening, and like we need that. Like for students, like it's difficult living in abroad, and like you, of course, like you can elaborate more on that, like a bit more. But like even for like students who are just 1 hour flight from home, it's difficult here. Like you have to do everything and you have to rely on yourself. And this is something that we are not used to.
You're not used to cooking and cleaning for yourself.
Exactly.
Hotel mama.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I find like
it's comfort.
Yeah.
It's easy, and also you don't have to translate things.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So
That's
I've
also
had,
haggle.
Like my British
sharing them
friends,
on
I
their
was
language,
continuously having to interpret, or if I told a joke, I had to contextualize the joke.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're talking with people from the same community and culture, it's all immediate. They understand, you get it, you laugh, you whatever. But I think you need both, right? You need the centering of the self, of your own identity, but you also need to be exposed to others. I mean, I lived 26 years abroad. First, I lived in Iran. We lived in Turkey for a short time, and then I was in Britain. In the last 4 years, I was in Germany. And every time I've started from scratch in a new country and I've met new people and I've learned or studied in a new language, I have grown. Every
Going through the
language,
process,
you know, and for your own strength, personality, and resilience, but also all the people that you met, all those amazing life stories that are very different from yours, all those particular experiences that you would never have, and you will see the world from different perspectives. And I think that's the thing. In English, you know, we have this expression, put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
We don't have that in Kurdish.
Of course.
I don't know if we have it in Arabic, but you know, that's a very important one, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And we don't do that.
Yeah.
We are not taught that. Some mothers are good and they always say, no, you should know that your friend is angry with you because maybe you did something. But many mothers in this community believe that their child is right and the other's wrong without knowing, you know, and that's a very bad thing, because you really need to, nobody has the full truth. Nobody has all the rights. It's somewhere in between.
It's always in between. It's all in the gray area.
Yes, it's all in the gray area that we don't like.
So you talked about like living abroad for 26 years and everything. So you got like your bachelor's degree in Cambridge, right?
Oxford.
In Oxford, and then like you pursued higher education with like your master's and your Ph.D. So like for someone who's not considering doing higher education and like I just want to finish AUS and do something else, why should someone like consider that beside like the pay raise and everything?
No, I never thought about pay raises. I know that's a major factor here. Like in my early years when I had returned to AUIS, I would see students that were very good at argumentation and beautiful writing, and they would be studying engineering. And I was like, why are you studying engineering? You're obviously good at thinking and writing and expressing yourself and ideas and theory. And they would be like, oh, but I don't want to be without a job. You know, I want to have a pension. You're 18. You don't have to worry about a pension yet. Secondly, I studied philosophy. I went to Oxford, as you mentioned. I studied philosophy. Everybody in my family and surrounding, you know, community, they were like, you're going to Oxford. Why don't you do something important? What job will you have with philosophy? I think if you're good, you will never be without a job. I've never had any problem finding jobs because employers don't necessarily look for business skills or engineering skills. Sometimes employers want creative minds.
Like you're good at what you do. Like you bring something to the table.
And you're dedicated and you're hardworking and so on. But in terms of pursuing higher education, I mean, I think it's a very personal choice and it depends on your thirst for knowledge or lack of it. I was always very curious. I think one of the issues I've had since childhood, I've had many questions. You know, I remember asking my religious teacher questions when I was a child and he shot me down, asking my parents questions that, you know, wasn't comfortable, wanting to know more, and for a while I was very much interested in philosophy. But after I finished my degree, I did my master's degree in philosophy. And then I became certain, actually, I am not interested in these abstract, how do we know what we know?
And theories.
I'm much more interested in why does war take place? What happens to communities when violent conflict
recurring again and again?
Exactly. What happens to communities? Why don't they recover so easily? How does trauma affect people's lives? And these questions were much more to do with community, society, history, political context. So I shifted gradually. For my PhD, I studied, gender and migration, refugee women's experiences. And I really, for my postdoctoral research, I researched about women survivors of genocide, the Anfal campaign, 1988. And I had these questions. I know that I watched many documentaries about the Anfal genocide, the gassing, the mass graves, the incarceration, but there were many questions about women's bodies, about sexual harassment, about how they coped with miscarriage, with giving birth in prison, with the death of children from starvation and illness. So many questions that I thought I didn't have the answer to. So I think if you are the kind of person who has questions, who's curious about the world, who wants to know more, and who wants to understand their own community, then obviously, and even if it is not about community, in your scientific field. If
Yes.
you want to know more, if you're not, your thirst for knowledge is not satisfied, absolutely. But I've always been suspicious about people who choose their studies based on their career, because
Yeah.
honestly, that changes.
Mm.
You may, when you're 18, even when you're 20 or 22, you may think that you want to do something.
Yes.
Yes, but you change your mind.
Yeah.
You grow, your interest grows, opportunities open up that weren't open to you 4 years ago.
Yes.
So I think study, I've always said that to students and nobody listens, study what you love.
Mm.
We have the English department here, the smallest major, right? The lowest number of students graduate from the English major simply because they think they can't find a job and parents don't want to pay private university tuition fees for
Yeah.
English. But I always say, if you love this, if this is what you want to do, please do it, because university is the time for doing something you enjoy, learning in the field you enjoy, and you can always do so much more with it later. Don't worry about the future. Graduate studies is not for everyone.
Yes.
For me, I wish I could do another PhD.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to have some time
Yeah.
where, I don't have to work. I focus on a particular question. I read and collect data and analyze it. I think that's fantastic. It will never happen again.
Yeah.
I can do research, but with research comes many other responsibilities. I think PhD time is a very good time. It's before you have your family. It's before you have responsibilities, before you worry about bringing in an income,
Yeah.
and you have that time to do this thing that you love. So I think make the most of it.
Yeah, my uncle actually he first graduated from agricultural field, something like agricultural engineering or something.
Yes.
And then he couldn't find the job, so he decided to go and study law again. So he graduated from being a lawyer, and then he did his master's in somewhere, and he did his PhD in Egypt. So he did all of that while being married and have three children. So it's interesting to see how you change. You are not the person, you shouldn't stick to a decision that you made when you were 18 years old.
Absolutely. My brother studied mechanical engineering, and he's never worked as an engineer. He's always worked as a journalist.
Yeah.
He was one of the founders of independent journalism here, and that's been his passion since. But when he was 18, 19 years old going to university, he had good grades, and everybody was like, everybody either becomes doctor or engineer.
Want a bit to make your parents happy,
Yes.
this certificate would make them really, really happy. So okay, I can help with that.
It's a very kind and big sacrifice.
Yes, it is. It's a difficult choice you have to make. Either follow your passion or be on peace and good terms with your parents, and it's always, as we said, the gray area. You have to both compromise and see what happens. Yeah, it's a difficult choice for students, and I kind of also get the parents' point of view. As we said, they come up from a difficult generation, and they have been through sanctions, and they have seen bad times.
Yeah.
Our parents always talks about during the 90s, when Iraq was under sanctuary from, I think, the US, right? And
it's internationally, international sanctions. Yeah.
They talk about how difficult it is, just get a piece of bread, and how difficult it is to find food, and that's for people who had they are middle and higher middle class.
Yeah.
So you get the way that they think this way, they want the best for you. They want
security for you.
Yes.
They want you not to be hungry.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So it's always there is always a counter argument, and there's always putting yourself in other people's shoes to see their point and everything. But it's for sure, few still have the thirst for education and doing more research and everything.
Yeah,
you can do it. Next, I want to talk about the the confusion currently among the young people, especially our generation, because of the difference from what we see online and what's the current state of our households. because like you're on your phone like for multiple hours a day,
Yeah.
and you see like all of the agenda and all of the cultures of the outside world, and there is a gap
Yeah.
with our households now and our values. So how do you think that would result and how it will be turned out?
Well, it's very interesting because representation, media representation, is again one of those things that's very divisive. So, for example, there's I don't remember the author's name. There's an Arabic journalist who's done this study about Arab women's image in the media, in the Arab media and international media. So, and he contrasts these images of, in the international media, this representation of Arab women as hijabi, oppressed, sometimes, in even in burqa, rights taken away from them, Muslim women generally, sorry, not Arab women, and then he contrasts that with Arab satellite channels' representation of women as these free sex objects who are dancing on stage and singing and free and experience, and there's nothing in between. In reality, most women are in between these two extremes, and their experiences and their reality is not represented because, in a way, there are political agendas behind each of these images, because the West wants to portray Middle Eastern women as the oppressed and need saving by the West. And, Arab media wants to show this progressive image of our community, women are liberated, we have no problem. In fact, both of them are false. There are very few women who are either this or that. The majority, as I said, are in between. And I think this is the problem of generally being allured by media, by not just media actually, by literature, by film, by music. Even our idea about romance is very much socially constructed by films and songs and media, right? About what is the love story and the happily ever after. We always see the couple until they are united, and then we think that's the end of the story. In fact,
that's the beginning.
The beginning of the story. And sometimes it's an unhappy story, unhappy ending. So I think we have very heightened expectations of love. And nowadays, because of all the satellite channels and pornographic channels, we have heightened expectations. At least men have heightened expectations of sex. And heightened expectations of the world, of experiences. In fact, this happens on many different levels. I remember reading about the sea in novels. When I was a teenager, I lived in Iran. I studied in Persian, so I read a lot in Persian. And I had never seen the sea. I'd only read about it in these novels, and it was amazing. And I always wanted to see the sea. For the first time when I was 18, I was in Istanbul and I saw the sea. And I was very much disappointed.
Really?
Yeah, because we create the symbolic world, the literary world, the imaginative world is sometimes...
It's perfect.
It's much more enhanced. The reality is much more dumbed down. So even expectations of women's beauty, of many of these daily experiences are shaped by
the media and
advertising and media of, as I said, even of sex. Real sex is not like that. That's not how relations between men and women work. And sometimes real women are flat. When men encounter them in reality, they report that they feel that this is not, they have been cheated. And it was much better when it was in the mind. So I think it's very dangerous, this virtual world or digital world or media world, this symbolic world that creates some ideas that do not reflect reality. I think we need to have our feet on the ground and to experience things for ourselves without, these heightened expectations can only lead to disappointment in reality. About love, about friendship, about sex, about community, about everything. And instead of trying to copy that, because, certain people do. Now we see plastic surgery. Many people...
pretty common.
It's everybody's trying to copy this image, and this image is not real.
And everyone is starting to look the same.
Yes.
I don't think that's attractive for the most people I know. If everyone starts to look the same, where is the
Individualism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and they sell, this is the sad thing, they sell this as individualism. Yes. So, for example, the latest fashion item, like it's a purple bag or it's an orange or whatever it is. Buy this, be yourself, express your individuality. But in fact, so many other women are buying it.
Yeah.
You are not. If you follow fashion, if you follow these trends of beauty and whatever other standards there are, you are actually becoming part of the crowd.
Yes.
But capitalism, neoliberalism, the advertising machine is so strong behind it that actually it persuades
you don't want
many
to
people.
feel left out and everything,
Yes,
so you
yes.
join these trends. Yeah.
It's difficult, and I think it's become more difficult for younger generations than it was at our time. I was just joking with a friend the other day and saying we were lucky that the mistakes we made were not recorded on camera.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Nowadays, if you make a mistake, there are so
It's
many
filmed
phones.
out and,
Everything
like,
is filmed,
yeah,
and
everyone can see you and laugh about it. And
yeah, if you
everything,
say something on Facebook and you regret it, there are so many screenshots already.
Yeah.
And in our time, there might have been an embarrassing moment, or you might have made a mistake. You would move on.
Yeah, no one had
and
to
people
know.
would forget.
Yeah.
But there are evidence now.
Yes.
There's evidence that you did something. So I think you lot have it much tougher. And I think that's why it's very important to be much more aware and to be above the current, actually, to understand where things are leading, to protect yourselves. I mean, this is a conversation I have with my daughter all the time. I'm like, trust cannot be easily given.
Yes.
I gave trust easily when I was a child. The costs were low.
Yes.
You give trust to a friend now, the costs are very high. Yeah. And it could lead to a total social death in the future. A stupid mistake you make as a child, as a teenager, it could lead to major problems in the future.
It could propagate and like follow you for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like, of course, yeah. Like one of the things, like I've been told that, watch out for what you say here, because like you don't know like how it would follow you, whether like in grad school or in like the workplace, like everything that you will say and like do would follow you everywhere. So like it's also one of the things that I really had to think
be
about.
careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially here, like for like people can like cancel culture.
Yes, yeah.
It's not only like just getting kicked out from like your workplace. It's like it's fatal. Like it's lethal.
It's social death.
Yeah.
It's social death.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also the fact is, it could be taken out of context.
Yeah.
So something you say, you're actually trying to say the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they cut out.
Yeah. That happens like everywhere.
Yeah.
Like you just like put 5-second clips of like multiple and many hours conversation, and you ruin it. And
Yeah, unfortunately.
So yeah, I think that's one of the like issues of like our current time, like because like we are so entangled with the internet, because like it's so easy, just pick up your phone between classes or in class or like and you just like scroll like, and it like never ends.
Yeah.
And like our attention span has been affected by that. Like I remember like a couple of years ago, like you would easily like just open out a movie and just watch for hours, or like pick up a book or do something. But now your mind is frustrated. Like you want this instant like dopamine rush, and it has like affected like this generation, and I think it will affect it even more and more in the future, especially now like we can see with like artificial intelligence and like the tools that has been like invested in, like they are pretty popular nowadays. And I think they are going to rechange education, because like now students can do so much more with just
they replace thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like leading to my next question is like, as an instructor, first of all, like how is it different from being a student, and second of all, like how are you going to adapt to the artificial intelligent machines that are...
It's a very scary one, that one.
Yes.
But what did you mean about the first part? How is it different from being a student?
Like you have studied like masters and PhDs, and you have been through that process.
Through the system.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was
but
just
now
saying
you are
that,
teaching that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying to my class a couple of lessons back that actually in my university where I studied, every 2 weeks we had to write 3 essays.
Yes.
So every week 1 essay for philosophy, every 2 weeks, one essay for psychology, an essay and a half a week.
Yes.
And for each essay, you had to read 5 to 7 sources, academic book chapters, journal articles, and so on, all academic sources. And obviously, it was philosophy. It was very difficult at times. I have even language issues. But that's what we did. Yeah. And sometimes you would stay up all night to finish your essay, but we did it. Nowadays, students might have like 2-3 essays a semester, maximum 4.
Yeah.
And they complain too many deadlines because it's very difficult to get students to read. And in particular, unfortunately, I mean, I read because I was interested, and if I had time, I would read even more than suggested, but I was very slow because of language barriers and not having a background in philosophy.
Yes.
But nowadays, I feel that if you teach a book, if there are summaries online, the students will go and read the
Of
summaries.
course, yeah.
So I try to have this sort of short writing assignments in class.
Yes.
Of course, during the COVID time, we couldn't do that. So for 2 years, we put that on hold. But I try to get students 15 minutes a week just to write.
Because like you can make them actually like supervise the whole thing.
I am
and
there.
everything.
I know that they've done it. And also what matters to me is their original work. It's their language.
Yes.
So, and I usually say to students, look, I know your English level. I have graded your writing assignments in class. This essay you've produced is perfect in terms of linguistic structure and grammar and mechanics, and this is not written by you. So that also helps me assess the level of the students' thinking, their writing skills, their English fluency. But also I try in those small writing assignments to get them to connect it to something in life.
Okay.
So whatever I ask them about the source we've been studying, so for example, I've been teaching The Handmaid's Tale again this semester. I teach them about something in the novel. For example, what's the purpose of testifying in this novel and whether or not it's successful. And then I ask them to provide a similar example in real life with this kind of mechanism works, and so on and so forth. So it's very important to me that students don't just get it about the book, but they also can apply that to real life.
Yeah, and that I think that's the higher level, the highest level of studying and understanding something is applying it to real life.
Yeah. So in the novel there's a quote where Aunt Lydia says there's more than one kind of freedom. There's freedom to and freedom from. So freedom from choice or freedom to choose, and we are giving you freedom from. You are free from choice, and you're free from violence, and we're protecting you, and we're providing for you.
Yes.
Therefore, you are really free, And the question of freedom, what does that mean? When we're free to choose, are we really free? When we're free from choice, are we really free? And give me an example from real life. I think these are very good, and they lead up to that, taking that extra step and connecting ideas to one's real life. I find that, as you said, students read much less than they did in my generation.
Yeah.
Less curious about ideas, maybe overwhelmed by too many things.
Yes.
There are so many opportunities to go out and socialize, and social responsibilities and opportunities, but in our time studying was the thing.
Yeah, and I think as I talked about, the internet has changed this whole generation and in many different ways. Back then you weren't always aware of what your friends are up to and what your second, third cousin is doing in another city, and we are so hyper focused and we are so engaged with our virtual identity and virtual profiles that we are kind of disconnected from here. And another thing, a lot, you didn't have to be always comparing yourself to people who are there is, I don't know if you watch football or not, but there's a 15 years old player that has just won a major league a few days ago. I'm considering, I was talking to my dad the other day, he's at the same age as my little sister. And what was I doing when I was 15? He's out there winning tournaments, and what
I wasted my life.
Yeah, what have I done? Because we have so many examples of people who made it, yeah, when at a very young age, and we are in constant pressure to
to
become that.
perform and
Yeah,
but that's not the whole story. I mean, a person who achieves it, or whatever it is, gets the recognition at 15. What happens to the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
We don't know that story yet.
yes,
And some of them, it's an anticlimax. You achieve your best at that age,
yeah.
and it goes down.
That what
Sometimes
happened
it's
to the
difficult.
actor in like Home Alone. Like he became so popular at a very very young age, and like how like it plays with people. Like you are not.
Success at
Yeah.
an early age where you can't handle it and
Yes.
you can't manage it. So I think it's, my father always said, my father was a poet, and he said, when you're young, you crave recognition and prizes. Most of the time you get it when you're too old to care.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they honor you, they give you prizes. It doesn't matter
Doesn't matter
anymore.
anymore. Yeah.
The ideal situation, I think, is it would be when you're middle-aged. If you build towards success,
Yeah.
right? Because it's also, if you win the Nobel Prize early on in your 20s, what's your next work going to be like?
Yeah.
What's your next book or your next discovery going to be like? It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to keep things in perspective, but I agree. It's a very competitive and tough world.
Mm.
We have this expression in English, big fish in a small pond,
Yes.
right? Many of us have been big fish in a small pond. Like you perform well, you stand out somewhere because maybe the others are not doing so well, or they don't care enough to do well.
Yeah.
But if you compete in the sea with the other big fish, then that's the real competition. But my problem with all of this is, why are we so achievement oriented?
Mm.
Yeah, why do we measure our lives by achievements? And I have done that. When I was younger, a year when I had my birthday, I always had to look back and say, what did I achieve this year?
Yes.
I don't think, now I'm older, I don't think it's about achievements anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, it's wonderful to have a new book out because, you've worked on it for I've worked on it for 20 years on and off. Yeah, but that's not what gives my life meaning. At the end of the day, what gives my life meaning is that I feel that I'm doing my best. I care about justice, and I do my part for justice. I care about the fact that I have tried to do no harm in whatever situation I've been in. I did my best. Sometimes I have failed. Sometimes I've fallen flat on my face. But I have in my life good people and relationships that I love, a place that I call home, and a small garden that I love. These are the things that give life meaning, right? Because achievements at the end of the day, I mean, so many people who are achievement oriented are not even happy.
Yeah.
Because the minute they achieve something, they're looking for the next, and then the next. It's like an addiction. Whereas to look at a flower in the morning, to think about sunset
with a peace mind.
Yeah, and to have a clear conscience, and to know that you're doing your best. That's all we can do, right? To be good, to be supportive, to stand by our values. For me, that's very important. And there have been moments where I have been pressured to compromise on what I believe in. And I have not done that, and I'm proud of myself for that. I think that gives life meaning. Things that you care about, the small things that everybody seems to think they are not important, but they are. I mean, going back to the relationships, family, friends, colleagues where you work, places where you feel good working there.
Yeah, and
these things matter.
Yeah, one of the sad things about our generation as well, it's most people are career oriented and so fixated on career and achievements, as you said, where they are starting to abandon the things that actually matter.
Yes.
Family is I've always talked about this. Family is one of the things that you should really pay high attention to, and you should really do your best, as you said, to try to have good relationship, whether it's your parents or it's your partners or your children, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. That's there's no point in achieving it all when you are alone up in a hill. There would be no one, no one would care about that.
Yeah, if you die alone or live in a nursing home. They did a study actually years ago. They followed a group for, I think it was a longitudinal study. So they followed them for 20 years or 30 years. And they found out the most the happiest people in that group were not the people who had the most money
Yeah.
and not the ones who'd done the most achievement-oriented people. It was the people who had the most stable relationships.
Yes.
And relationships in terms of marriages, but also friendships, friend circles, and so on. They were healthier, they were happier, they were more content. Of course, the study was done about men. It didn't include women. But I think I see the logic in that. I see the logic of connections, because that our connections to the world, the natural world, and to the community is a very important thing that sustains us at very difficult and dark times. So it makes sense that these would be the things that sustain us at the end.
Yeah, like even like Steve Jobs, like on his deathbed, when like he was asked like, what did you wish like you have done different? Like he said, like I wish I spent more time with my like daughter or like my family, because like this is someone who has like changed the way of the future, and like he
created problems for us.
The uncalculated risk, and like so that's one of the important things. Like we are reaching an hour here, so I want to ask you about like your favorite movies and TV shows, because like that's our question throughout, like for every guest. So like, what's your favorite movie and what's your favorite TV show?
Oh goodness, I have so many.
Yeah.
I don't know where to start from.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Films. I like films. What could I say? Drop my memory. I watch films all the time. The latest. I don't know. I can't think. My mind is blank. But goodness, pressure.
Yeah.
So there are many films that I loved. They may not be my favorite alone. But for example, many of the films that, of course, are about women or about injustice, slavery, racism, sexism, Holocaust, these films matter to me. I watch them, and I'm notorious. I cry a lot when I watch these movies.
Yeah.
Of course, a few years ago, there was the film The Wife.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched it.
Yeah,
it was about a writer who wins the Nobel Prize.
Yeah. I haven't watched it actually, but like I think it was nominated for like Best Actress. Like it was nominated for Best Actress. Yeah.
I think it won a few prizes, but I'm not sure what. So it's the relationship between a married couple. One of them, both of them are writers to start with, but the man gets recognition and he wins this major prize at the end.
Have you seen Big Eyes?
Big Eyes? No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's also like it's the same thing. Like it's based on a real story where like the husband is like pretending that he's a famous painter, but actually it's his wife that he's keeping locked up. Like she does all the painting, and like I don't want to spoil anything, but like it's such an amazing movie. It starts Amy Adams, and I don't know the actor's name, but it's an amazing movie.
Yeah, similar stories. For example, she says this recent film about
I've seen that,
what
actually.
started the U2 movement. New York Times. Women Speak. It's about women. It's a sort of fictionalized version of patriarchy. So these women who are drugged and raped by men of their tribe, they have this conversation about whose fault is it? Should we forgive them? Should we leave the community?
Yeah.
Should we put them, what is justice? There are many others, actually, I can't think of. But, of course, the films about the Holocaust, Sarah's Key was one of the things that stayed with me a lot. Schindler's List, of course.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
I mean, the famous American actress Sophie's Choice.
Yeah.
These are films and about slavery also. These are amazing films. I also like fantasy.
Yeah.
For escapism.
Yes. Yeah.
It's nice to sort of get into this other world, but I think Matrix, the first one, was good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and this Avatar, again, the first one was very good.
Yeah.
These, because it's also about utopia and dystopia and all of that. So they sort of address issues of a future, about the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and so on. So these are philosophically interesting, but also very well made films. It's a cliche to say I very much like the Game of Thrones.
Oh, really? Even sorry for that. Yeah. Technical issue.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, of course, not the the last episodes, that twist, all of that was quite out of the blue.
Yeah.
But I very much liked the conversations about, politics, leadership, justice, truth, all these questions. I thought the dialogues were fantastic. The acting was very good. The scenery was beautifully shot and so on.
It's truly like one of the best TV shows, but like the way that they ruined it.
And at the end, yes.
It leaves such a bad taste. And have you seen the new TV series like House of the Dragon?
Terrible.
Really?
I thought so. I thought the acting was very bad. It got better towards the end.
Yeah.
But it started off the English actors. I mean, I thought it was.
I really thought like after the bad taste of this last season, I wouldn't get invested in the universe, but actually, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. It was pretty fun also. But
there was a drama series called C that was very interesting.
I didn't like that. Yeah, I didn't enjoy it a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
I really thought this is a very interesting idea of exploring the idea of sight as something evil, which has brought destruction,
yes.
and in a world
like
people,
a pretty interesting premise.
Yeah, and also in a world where not being able to see is an advantage and privilege, which reconnects you to nature and life and people. I thought that was very interesting. But what else is out there?
You have taught The Handmaid's Tale. So, what do you think of the TV show?
I haven't seen the TV show. I have watched the old movie. I didn't like it very much.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, if you've read a novel, the film is not.
It's not that.
Yeah.
For me, it's the other way around, actually.
Yeah? Well, I agree, like something like The Hobbit or, Lord of the Rings. Those are
the visuals are
much
so
better.
much the experience, yeah.
But sometimes if it's a complex story, like 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez, when it was made into a film, no. Because so many ideas and conversations are missing from that.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think we're ending the episode.
Yeah.
What final remarks would you like to end with?
I have no idea. I just think I hope people will read again.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it really stimulates a different part of your brain.
Yes.
It keeps your imagination alive. It prevents Alzheimer's, or
yes.
it goes against it. Maybe it delays it. It engages a different kind of the brain, and it keeps you alive and young, and it keeps you connected to your imagination and your ability to empathize with other different kinds of people in different worlds. I really hope people will continue to engage with reading, and I would hate to think it's something that's going out of fashion.
Yeah, I hope that as well. Yeah. I hope we go back and see what worked in the past, and we take that and see what didn't, and we would improve and move on. Yeah. So for everyone, thanks for listening, Dr. Choman. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good day.